So this week's video comes to us from Jeranism. I believe he did a live stream and then somebody else cut up that live stream and put that into a video and then that was re-uploaded, but it's flat earth. Let's take a look at it.
So the problem with this whole thing, if you ask me, is that you would think that they could mention other reasons that people are flat earthers, like the fact that NASA has been lying about going to the moon for 50 years, the fact that they took more photos on the moon than is even possible. Even when you multiply it out by the amount of people on the moon, the amount of time they were on the moon, you take all the images, take in the time that they were on video that we know of, and they would have been taking photos at a rate of like 1 every 10 seconds the rest of the time they're on the moon. Completely and totally impossible.
The Project Apollo archive on Flickr apparently has all of the photos from the Apollo missions, and in total they have 14,218 photos, not including the 10 that are obviously not from the missions. So when you take the EVA time, that's extravehicular activity, or the time spent on moonwalks, and divide that by the number of pictures, you get an average of 1 picture every 20.4 seconds. But wait, there were 2 people taking pictures, so that would be an average of 1 picture every 40.8 seconds per person. So, how can this be? Well, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, let's say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I just took 15 pictures. Now I'm going to assume that this video right here that I'm in, that I'm recording, that you're watching, is going to last 10 minutes, because that's what I aim for. So that would be an average of 1 picture every 40 seconds. But how could that be? I mean, how annoying is this video if I'm just stopping every less than a minute to take pictures? That's so annoying. I could never say anything in these videos because of how much time I'd be spent taking pictures. You see what's happening here? You can take a whole bunch of pictures at one time, and that will greatly increase your average. And looking through these photos, you see that's kind of what happened. Not only that, but they didn't have to take that much time setting up these pictures, since they already knew beforehand what the lighting conditions would be, and they adjusted the camera settings accordingly beforehand. Not only that, but this is only accounting for EVA time spent outside of the vehicle, moonwalks. But not every picture was taken during a moonwalk. There were plenty of pictures taken from inside the vehicle. So it's not as crazy as it seems.
Or that water always finds its level.
What exactly do you mean, water always finds its level? I hear this from flat earthers a lot, but I never hear it explained to know exactly what they mean. I mean, do you mean that the water is flat? Because it's not. The surface of the water is always perpendicular to the center of gravity. So if the Earth is a globe, then the water is curved as well. So your argument basically boils down to it looks flat, so it must be flat, or at least that's what I understand it to mean. But, I mean, of course, the obvious thing that they're overlooking is that the Earth is so big that it's difficult to see the curve with the naked eye, except in some instances like this, or this. But obviously, that's not good enough for them.
Or the fact that surveyors don't take perspective into account, even though we know 100% that things appear to get smaller with distance.
I really don't know what you're trying to say here, so I can't really comment on it much. But I mean, why would a surveyor need to take perspective into account? And how would he? I don't understand why flat earthers are so adamant that things look smaller with distance. Because we know. It's obvious. I'm pretty sure this comes from a misunderstanding of a round Earth argument, but I really don't know what this is trying to prove. But on the topic of surveyors, they don't always take the curvature of the Earth into account because they don't always need to, depending on what they're doing. But over long enough distances, they will use estimates that work well enough for what they're doing, be that a simple equation or using a reference ellipsoid. They do use it.
Or that we can see Canigoo from 1,000 feet high when it's 175 miles away. I mean, we can either admit what we see, or we can trust men who tell us that we actually don't see the mountain chain, that you see the sun and the moon cause mountains to rise a few thousand feet, displaying themselves perfectly for you at the horizon line.
I already responded to this claim in a previous video, and I feel like I really nailed it the first time, so here's a blast from the past. He didn't provide a citation, but I believe that this came from this video, which also did not cite the original video, but I believe I found it here, and if you look in the description, it links to this website that states that it's only seen every so often during favorable weather conditions, and that's because it's caused by atmospheric refraction. I'm not jumping to conclusions here, it's genuinely stated on this website in French, and the fact that this is not seen the majority of the time disproves your point entirely.
Or they don't mention the Chicago skyline, where the globe calls for the buildings to be hidden completely. But we can look at the Skunk Bay footage, the time-lapse footage, and see how weather affects our views of distant shores and how atmospheric effects can account for everything that we see and everything that we can't.
You mean, look at the footage that says that it's a mirage? It's not actually a mirage, it's actually called a looming, but still, there's your explanation as to how we would see this on the globe Earth. Now, to be clear, Skunk Bay is in Washington, so that's a separate issue from being able to see Chicago from Michigan. But the time-lapse in question was taken from the top of a dune at Warren Dunes State Park, and the tallest dune there is 240 feet or 73 meters above the surface of the water, which would give you enough height to be able to see to Chicago. Being higher makes you able to see farther? That sounds like a round Earth to me.
Or how they explain our observations without assuming the Earth is a giant ball in space.
We don't assume that the Earth is a globe. We've proven it. We've proven it since the ancient Greeks. Stuff like lunar eclipses, southern stars, stellar parallax and aberration, images from space, and more stuff that, well, you'll reject. But I'm not going to go into that right now because I feel like I'm dealing with the counter-arguments to those claims, which we'd be going in circles.
Just like density and buoyancy can completely explain gravity, and the only thing they can't explain, of course, is how the Earth became a sphere. No, gravity, this unseen force, must exist because everything must pull to the center. It's required by the model that has been built on for hundreds of years.
No, we didn't come up with gravity to support our model. We have observed and proven our model, and we've observed and proven gravity. They are both sensible and consistent with each other. Density alone cannot replace gravity. This is because buoyancy requires a gradient of pressure in a fluid, and this is caused by gravity. Buoyancy requires gravity. Not only that, but buoyancy doesn't pull things down. It only pushes things up. So, bottom line, you still need a downward force. We're not just coming up with bogus ad hoc hypotheses to support our claims like you guys are.
How about ignore asteroids and meteors, or who chooses which gravity? Einsteinian, where it's isn't a pull force but a push force because mass bends the fabric of space-time? Or is it Newtonian gravity? Which one are we actually looking at?
Here, you show that you don't really know what you're talking about. To answer your question, Einstein's theory of general relativity is more accurate. But, for most purposes, Newton's law of universal gravitation is simpler, more practical, and accurate enough to use. Which one is correct? Einstein. But both will work. Are you trying to say that it's fishy that we used to believe one and now we believe another more? Because that's flawed. Changing your mind in light of evidence against what you previously thought is not a bad thing. If you find something else to be more accurate than what you thought before, it's reasonable to change your mind. And I'm not really sure what you're talking about with asteroids and meteors, but they show a picture of other things that could cause craters. Which, I mean, so? Is that supposed to prove something? Is that supposed to prove that meteors don't exist? I really don't know.
Don't mention that NASA trains in a pool, as if this training was anything like space, with somebody swimming behind you carrying all your cords and handing you all your tools. Well, that doesn't happen in space. Why the hell would we practice like that? I don't know. It doesn't make any sense to me.
Do you have any better ideas? How would you simulate weightlessness on the ground, if that's an easy task? These astronauts train in a pool with a suit that's specially designed to be neutrally buoyant, which is the closest we can get to weightlessness, and this training can help them be prepared for spacewalks and making repairs on the ISS. The people following them, well, 2 of them are for safety, and 1 of them has a camera. I'm not sure what every diver does, though, but surely you can see that this would be a decent way to prepare for microgravity.
How about the idiotic design of the ISS, that no engineer would ever put every operating cable and control and cord and multiplexer, demultiplexer, all of it they put on the outside of the craft? It makes no sense. It's actually embarrassing to think that any engineer would come up with that design. The impossibility of it.
How exactly do you think it's designed? It's not like they just put anything and everything on the outside, but there are some things there, like sensors, solar panels, cameras, radiators. It makes sense for these things to be on the outside. Do you expect there to be nothing on the outside of the station that could ever possibly fail? I'd like to see how you would design a space station.
Or that it's maintained and cleaned by a 3-person crew. I mean, that is ridiculous. The amount of cleaning and dusting and everything else that would need to be done on that, and the seal protection, and it's just not there. You know, if they get a leak because they're little O-rings, well, you got a leak. Then you do a spacewalk, I guess.
How dirty do you think the ISS is? As I understand it, things are cleaned and disinfected pretty well before they're sent up to the station, and they have some pretty darn good air filtering, because they kinda have to. It's not like the crew is just throwing food around everywhere in there. Honestly, I'm surprised that they even need 3 people to do it. I also like how your idea of an airtight, pressurized module involves little O-rings that could leak. But yeah, there are things that could leak, and there have been leaks. But the only airwalks that I found that were dealing with leaks had to do with ammonia coolant leaks, which is fun stuff, but it happens.
Don't mention the $53 million a day. That might be a little bit too much for people to grasp. Like, what do you mean? Who gets $53 million a day? NASA does. What do they do with it? I don't know. Launch rockets about once a month into the sky. And they go pretty. And then they do a sonic boom from the sky, and people like Red's Rhetoric have an orgasm? Oh, that's the only thing I really noticed.
So NASA has all this money, but what could they possibly be doing with it all? I'm going to guess that it has to do with aeronautics and space. After all, they are the National Aeronautics and Space Administration. Look, it's not like they're just sitting on their asses and getting paid for nothing. These are literal rocket scientists. They research aeronautics and aerospace, and they have a space program. Do you know how much it costs to launch air and spacecrafts? The space shuttle program had an average cost of $1.5 billion per launch. That money is being used. Sure, if I told you that NASA had a budget of $19.3 billion for the 2017 fiscal year, that would sound like a lot of money, but keep in mind that NASA is part of the United States government, and as such, the government, or should I say taxpayers, are the ones paying for it, and from that perspective, they're actually paid pretty little. They're only less than 1% of the US federal budget, and they've only ever been a max of 4.41%, and that was in 1966 during the Apollo program. That was 4 pennies on your tax dollar, and now it's less than 1. And like that, I don't think I have much time in this video. And we haven't really gotten very far into this video, which, to be fair, this video is very compact. And all of the information in there, and there's a lot of stuff to go through, so watch out for a follow-up. But I assure you, it's pretty much more of the same. But thank you for watching, and goodbye. This channel is funded in part by viewers like you. Thank you.